Hi guys, how's it going? Happy last day of the show. Woo! Everyone's properly partied and had a good time, I'm assuming, yes? Yeah, all right. People been doing some good business, writing orders, getting orders. Has money been made these last few days? Yes, yes. Amazing, happy to hear that. I'm gonna sit down because I've also had a long trip and today's talk is going to be with me sitting down. And I'm very excited to share with you guys some things that have been on my mind in terms of how retail has been progressing. Certainly there have been so many changes, so many things that we've all been trying to navigate. And today I'm going to talk about some really interesting concepts and theories that I've been putting together in terms of where the industry is heading and how we can actually find ways of being innovative and being strategic as we're looking to build our businesses. So before I get started, just to have a quick show of hands, who here has a brand? Who here is representing a brand? Amazing. How many people here have a store? Anyone have a retail store? Amazing. And how many people are just trying to sell stuff? Doesn't really matter what's going on, right? You're trying to sell stuff. I am, or we all are, right? And so today, the conversation is really going to be around some of the major changes that are happening across the world in our industry, but ultimately how to be able to pivot and change your business to take advantage of this consumer that, to be honest, is 100% new, right? There's a new way of shopping today. Has anyone's shopping behavior changed in the last couple years? Yeah, mine too, right? And so the very first thing that I like to do when I'm thinking about retail and shifts and changes is actually take a step back and understand my own consumer behavior, right? How have things been changing for me? What are the ways in which I've had to adapt as a consumer, and therefore what are some of the ways in which I'm looking for brands, or anyone for that matter, who's trying to sell me anything, how am I looking for them to now cater to me? So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share with you a little bit about who I am. My name is Shama Maher. It is not phonetically spelled. I'm currently based in San Francisco, where I grew up, where I'm from. Spent about 10 years in New York, 10 years in LA, and COVID brought me back to San Francisco, back home, which is kind of exciting. In the last 20 years, a lot has changed in San Francisco, so if that's gonna be my forever home, I don't know about that. But it's beautiful, and I certainly love it. Now, I have been totally taken by storm in terms of how Web3 and NFTs are shaping the way that we think about retail. And so today I'm going to touch a little bit about that, and I'm calling myself an evangelist. And why is that? Because I actually do believe that the future of digital and how we start to look at customer engagement, loyalty, revenue streams, productization is heavily going to be shifted by the advent of Web3. And so today I'll be focusing a little bit more on particularly NFTs and projects, but certainly as they relate back to two other things which might seem like mutually exclusive topics, including the supply chain, which we've all been heavily impacted by, and then also thinking about things like physical space, which, to be honest, guys, physical space and digital still go hand in hand. I'm a global brand builder at Scaling Retail. I am now in 10 years of business running Scaling Retail, which, my gosh, is so exciting and makes me feel very dated. And within that vehicle of Scaling Retail, I help scale up brands. Now, brands across all different verticals. In fact, I work with clients in cannabis and lifestyle, clients who are looking to build fashion in terms of fashion licensing or their own fashion brands. I'm a global brand builder because my clients are in Tanzania, Shanghai, San Francisco, LA, you name it, because honestly, to do business, we can be anywhere. Now, I've also had the privilege of winning a couple awards, which is fantastic. Women's Wear Daily nominated me one of 20 women, I wish it was 10, 20 women in business, which is very exciting. And I've also won a few awards for being Female Entrepreneur of the Year. Back in 2020, I did launch a business with a co-founder, and within 6 months, we did 3 million gross. That's pretty exciting. I'm also an investor, an advisor, and an entrepreneur. So I do a little bit of angel investing. I'm looking at the sides of how businesses are scaling, predominantly in CPG products. And I'm also a huge evangelist of all things retail. So those are my credentials. But I'm certainly a dreamer, and I think big. And I think all of us here today are blessed and cursed to be in this industry. We are blessed because it's always changing, it is always engaging, it will always be an exciting place to be. And we're cursed because it's stressful and it is always changing. And my gosh, it is expensive to be in this industry. And staying on top of things is so important, and it's hard. So it's a blessing and it's a curse. That is my email in case anyone wants to get in touch. And then those are the ways you can contact me in terms of Instagram. So today we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about the 2021 retail recap, and then going into 2022 and what we see as most important. Now, 2021 was actually extremely important. Most of us here today were thinking about how we were going to be rebounding, right? A lot of us gone through so many interesting supply chain shifts, and all of a sudden we're now tasked to say, how are consumer behaviors shifting? Did we actually buy enough product, right? How are we managing with our shifts in our supply chain? And it turns out, guys, holiday sales grew in 2021 to a record high, which is very exciting. Anyone here sell online? Anyone here dealing with e-commerce? Amazing. We saw fantastic years last year when it came to record sales in terms of e-com and certainly selling direct to that consumer. We also had a ton of IPOs in fashion. Many people, because of a lot of the stimulus packages, had a tremendous amount of surplus of savings, and they went into the retail stock market and ended up purchasing. So we saw so many more people engaging on the stock market, and we also saw so many record-breaking companies IPOing, right? Everyone heard about the IPO for Allbirds, for Poshmark. This is really amazing. This is amazing because we have not seen so many companies hit that global scale in terms of reach, accessibility, and being traded on that public market, so many at once. Now, certainly today, everyone's taking a look at the stock market, and I'm not an investor advisor, so nothing I say here is advice when it comes to that. But when it comes to thinking about where the world is looking at retail, right, it is not too far off to have a conversation with someone on the street and mention supply chain and have them have some sort of opinion, right? That is kind of the first time we've ever really been faced with that. Why is that? Because the last few years it has been so difficult to get product to your doorstep. So consumers today are far more intimated with the issues that we have as retailers and as brand owners than ever before, right? They're far more sensitive to price changes. They're more sensitive now because of the way Amazon Prime basically has you with a product in your hands tomorrow. And really the challenges when other brands take about 7 to 10 days, right? So when it comes to the impacts and how consumers are thinking about supply chain, how they're thinking about engagement with brands, I don't think we've ever had more visibility and more intimacy with our customers in a very, very long time, other than physical retail space and building that one-on-one community. We also saw supply chain mayhem, so skyrocketing prices, strikes, shutdowns, changes with labor. I'm sure many of you guys here today are intimated with what's going on with the Canadian border. You might also have on the top of your mind the knowledge that in July there's going to be a possible labor strike on the West Coast ports. This is horrifying, right? It's horrifying because coming off of a tumultuous last few years, we're not quite out of the clear yet. Shipping timeframes went from 50 to 115 days, and about $2,000 to $20,000 in cost for shipping a crate. So this is unprecedented, right? We are now in a position where we have to communicate with our consumers, hey, this is gonna take a little bit longer. Hey, this is actually a cost that we might have to pass on to you, right? These are things that we've never had to do before. We also had direct-to-consumer brands chasing physical. Traveling pop-ups, in-store experiences came back in full effect as vaccinations started to roll out. In fact, I was recently back in LA. I was walking down Sunset over in Silver Lake, and I saw so many more new stores popping up in the last 6-month time period than I had in a few years. It was amazing. I was asking myself, how are all these stores having the funding and resources? And when I walked into some of these smaller boutiques, I realized a lot of these people were first-time retailers, right? That is amazing. It is amazing to see innovation and entrepreneurship have a high spike when we're seeing such tumultuous times in our industry, right? So that tells me throughout these time periods, historically, when things are tough, entrepreneurialism is always on the rise. We're always looking for innovation, and we're always looking for new ways to get in front of that customer. In fact, I don't know if you guys are seeing on the market today, but I've been so impressed with this whole new category of beverages, non-alcoholic spirits, right? In fact, now there are entire little retail shops popping up that are not selling alcohol, they're selling non-alcoholic aperitifs, wines, and other forms of beverages. Now, that is very interesting innovation, right? And this is a very new, interesting way in which consumers are shifting. Now, brands were obviously launching into the metaverse last year. Has anyone bought an NFT or has, okay, amazing. I'm happy to say that I have about 25 of them right now, which has been really fun to collect. And it's been actually really fun to watch and see how brands are starting to engage in the space. Again, a new advent of 2021. You know, we would not have been thinking about 3 years ago that brands today would be looking at increasing their revenue streams by selling a digital asset, right? That is very new, right? In the past, we would have said, okay, we're gonna enter into AR, VR, we're gonna do this as maybe some sort of fun experiential play because possibly it's gonna help us get press or maybe it's gonna help us engage our consumers. It is beyond just traditional engagement now. We're actually looking at these digital assets as new revenue streams and as new opportunities to increase your loyalty, right? So that I think is very, very exciting. So 2021 was pretty amazing, actually. It was tumultuous, it was tough, but ultimately has the inklings of what I think is going to be a tremendous new North Star. So let's talk a little bit about some supply chain shifts. Now, what I love so much about thinking about supply chain is quite simply just how small our world is at this moment. When it comes to thinking about how interconnected we are, right? We are so impacted, not just by what our manufacturers are doing, but we're also heavily impacted by things like sustainable development goals, right? We're heavily impacted by environmental goals. And one of the things that I think is so important for us to understand is it's not just us as an industry, again, that has to deal with these things internally, but consumers now have so much more visibility into all of the issues and all of the things that we are dealing with. And they are going to start to feel, right, some of the ramifications of many of those things as well. So let's talk a little bit about some of these SDG goals. By 2023, a lot of the ships, right, when it comes to international ports and shipping, have been mandated to reduce their carbon emissions by 13%, right, which is great. We're all about reducing carbon emissions. However, on the flip side of that, one of the very interesting things that we're starting to recognize is that by a lot of these vessels not being able to really change their engines, by them being so indoctrinated into how they're operating, which is actually quite efficient, in order to be able to reach some of those lower carbon emissions, it is actually going to mean an increase in the time that they're actually going to be on the boat, right? So we're looking here at making significant changes in terms of carbon emissions, but if something's going to be in the boat longer, right, or if something's going to take longer time, what is going to be actually the ripple effects of many of these changes? And that, I think, is important to recognize. The next thing that we're looking at in terms of shifts have to do with nearshoring and creating agile infrastructure. Now, is anyone here manufacturing in the United States? No, okay. I had the privilege yesterday of being on a panel with a wonderful company that actually does about 95% of their manufacturing here in the United States. Obviously something that's very challenging to do. Challenging because of the reskilling, challenging because of being able to find these different manufacturers, but also what's amazing about looking at how we're diversifying where our manufacturing is the ability to keep your doors open. The ability to diversify where you're manufacturing will allow you to create better relationships with your retailers. So what are some of my clients and what are some of the brands doing today? Well, they're obviously looking and saying, okay, if manufacturing in some of these other countries is seeing record slow times in terms of being able to get these products to our retailers, which is obviously going to be impacting things like chargebacks, cancellations, and is going to maybe have a pretty big threat when it comes to the surviving of your company, you probably want to ask yourself, well, how am I looking at my assortment planning and how might I be able to countersource many of not only the raw materials, but also some of the manufacturing in other countries, potentially in your domestic country, right? So looking at things like nearshoring, which is, hey, maybe I'm not manufacturing here in the United States, but maybe I'm actually manufacturing in Mexico or in Canada or somewhere close by is really one of the big things that I've been seeing surfacing in the last few years, certainly in this last year. Now, when we're thinking about the offset of those prices and how we're looking at kind of increasing those price points and communicating that to our consumer, the ways that I've been seeing that has been so fascinating, right? It's coming in the form of smaller brands getting on Instagram Live, talking to their consumers, and really pulling them into the story of their small business operations. Now, this is not the first time that I've seen smaller brands get on Instagram Live and talk to their consumers directly. In fact, during the initial lockdown and shutdown in about April of 2020, many small brands got onto Instagram Live and started to develop a one-on-one relationship with their consumers. So guess what? If you were one of those businesses that actually had those relationships and that was starting to develop more intimacy with your customers, by the time you get on Instagram Live today and you're telling them, hey, these are the issues that we're facing, here's what's going to happen, you're going to have a far more higher buy-in percentage of those consumers who are willing to come with you along that journey. When it comes to lack of visibility, when it comes to increased price hikes without that sort of communication, that's really when we start to see consumers looking for alternative places to spend their purchasing dollars. So that sort of intimacy, I think, is really kind of at the forefront. Now, when we think about the kinds of brands that are at the most risk right now when it comes to these shifts and changes, it's really the direct-to-consumer brands. Why is that? Well, when it comes to thinking about what consumers have been asking of us, many companies in the last 2 years decided to launch loungewear. They decided to go into athleisure, right? When we were thinking about opportunities and how we were going to grow our businesses and maybe look at what are the holes in the market over the last 2 years, many of us decided to go into these other categories. Well, what's happening now? People are now returning back to work. People are going out more. All the shows that I've been walking over the last 3 days, people have been purchasing a lot. Open to buys are being filled by dressy, they're being filled by occasion. People are ready to step out. So as a direct-to-consumer brand that has maybe shifted your product offerings, you want to ask yourself, how am I managing my assortment planning and my consumer needs right now, given that these things are going to shift and change? Now, many of you guys have also heard about what's going on with Peloton. Did you guys hear about that? Yeah, okay. I'm gonna tell the rest of you guys what happened with that. So here's what's fascinating. Peloton saw the biggest increase in their business during the pandemic. Why? It was a luxury item, absolutely, but it was an item and a product that was really driven towards people working out at home, which is incredible, right? The IPO, the stock prices were high. It was a really, really phenomenal success. And then what happened? People started to shop less. They bought less, and then they ended up making some very, very drastic moves. In the last 90 days, Peloton stopped manufacturing new products. Everything came to a screeching halt, and they said, we need to focus on selling through what we have. They'd over-projected demand, which many direct-to-consumer brands have done. In fear of not having product in time, and fear of not being able to have something new for our consumers, we may find ourselves in a position where we have overbought and where we have actually diversified in ways that are no longer relevant to today's market. So what happened to Peloton? They obviously stopped their manufacturing, they're working through selling their products, and because of their shifts in demand and consumer sentiment, they actually ended up laying off about 2,800 people in the last few weeks. Right? This is just one, I think, amazing example if we start to think about what's happening with direct-to-consumer brands that were very bullish on the products, that they actually ended up becoming very popular during the pandemic. So when we're looking at these shifts and changes, we have to ask ourselves, did we overbuy? Do we have more stuff on its way? Certainly many of those products are probably on a boat. When it comes to manufacturing in China and the number of commercial planes that are coming from China to the US, many of us used to air freight things, but there are fewer planes. With fewer planes, there's fewer spaces. Fewer spaces are higher prices for you to pay as a brand, right? So when we're starting to trickle this back down and we're saying, oh my gosh, not only do I might have more product, I maybe don't know when it's going to arrive, and I might be finding myself sitting in an empty space right now. So how do I fill that space? How do I communicate with my consumer today, given that I don't know when my product might be arriving? I might have canceled orders from my retailers, and I know as a brand or retailer that I need to be keeping up with conversation, right? If I don't have anything new, if I'm not getting on Instagram Live, or I'm not on TikTok and I'm not talking about something, I might actually be in jeopardy of becoming irrelevant. And so what you should be asking yourself right now is not just, oh shit, how do I stay relevant given that there are all these issues? It's also, how do I actually diversify who I am as a brand or as a business beyond just the product? Now, I think I probably said this for the first time, maybe 7 years ago, which was, if you were not selling a product, what would you be selling to your customer? What is the emotional connection beyond the physical goods? And so what's really exciting, and what I'm starting to see, is many different brands taking on different initiatives. Obviously, we're looking at things like NFTs, we're looking at things like sustainability initiatives, and we're also looking at in real life experiences. So one really cool example here is the Tommy for Life initiative to repair and remake old garments to be able to resell. So many of you guys today might be asking yourselves, if you have a brand, how can I actually start to build in some circularity to my product development? How can I start to develop a buyback program, right? Am I developing a relationship with ThreadUp, right? How am I looking at the end of life of my garments, and how can I actually get my consumer to email me or come back to me during a downtime of them maybe not purchasing something? So sustainability initiatives, I think, are a fantastic first step. Like I mentioned, we're looking at more boutiques and store openings, which I actually think is amazing. Over in Los Angeles, where I used to live, I was so impressed by many of the initiatives to open up these very small pop-up centric mall environments like The Row, right, or Platform. So as we're looking at the physical expressions of our brands, what I think is the most incredible thing that's happened in the last few years is really the way we've been looking at leasing and managing property. Those of you guys who have brands today or have retail stores, you have an opportunity now more than ever to be able to renegotiate and work with different property managers to get spaces for shorter periods of time at more negotiable leases. And that, I think, is very important. Your consumers are ready to come out from behind those screens, and they're ready to engage. And guess what? An in real life activation that maybe is a customer appreciation event or an opportunity to be able to connect with them in order to crowdsource new ideas, in order to introduce them to each other, that concept of community, which is so important. Physical space is an amazing way to do that. And then lastly, we're looking at these digital invitations. And what I think is so important here as we look at digital, as we're moving to a Web3 world, and I'll kind of unpack my philosophies and feelings behind that, we're really looking at digital invitations. We're looking beyond sending someone 6 different pop-ups when they come to your website in order to get their email. Consumers are too smart, right? We are all here too smart. Like how I opened up the conversation, if we actually know, right, as consumers, how we're being marketed to, and what we like and what we don't like, then why on earth would I continue to send 6 pop-ups in order to customer acquisition over email if I know for myself that there are better ways to do that, right? So that opportunity to look reflexively at our own behavior, I think, is a fantastic first step to start to understand what are the marketing initiatives and ways of doing engagement. And so today I want to invite you to think about digital invitations rather than just a digital strategy, right? Rather than just some sort of launch of a certain item, right? A certain kind of a pop-up or a way of getting someone to give you their SMS. Okay, let's talk a little bit about crypto and NFTs and Web3 and like all this super exciting stuff. Have any of you guys today been kind of wondering what the hell's going on in that space and kind of how it manifests and what to do? Yeah, it's kind of exciting and crazy. And before we jump into some of the logistics, what I really want to invite everyone to think about is that the ways in which we now look to represent ourselves in the world today isn't just in me wearing a blue jacket on stage. but it's how I choose to engage on Zoom. It's how I choose to engage on Twitter. It's how I choose to engage in all of the other spaces where my identity is important. And how we look at our identities is becoming even more important as we start to bridge the physical and the digital spaces. So you may not understand, because you might say, hey, I'm not on a gaming platform. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on those spaces. But guess what? If you do not brand yourself and you are a leader in your business, you will be branded by default as someone who is not up with the times on how consumer behavior and shifts are happening. So you are branded regardless. You know, what I've been telling people over the last few weeks, I've been hosting a series of small educational seminars on NFTs and how brands are working towards more digital futures. And at the end, I tell everyone, if you do not go out there and buy your own domain name with your name, I will do it and I will sell it back to you at 10 times the price. Why? Because we are secretly, and maybe not so secretly, moving into a space where those digital identities are so much more important. So let's talk a little bit about NFTs and why they're important. So like I mentioned, we're having these major supply chain shifts. Consumers are wondering, how do I actually stay engaged with a brand? Who's relevant? Who's talking to me? And if you don't have a product to sell or your product's not coming fast enough, you are scrambling to figure out how to engage and communicate. Now, in the world of crypto, there are so many channels, and in fact, we could probably spend half a day talking specifically about all the different ways. Today, I'm gonna focus on NFTs, predominantly because all of you guys need to figure out how to make more money. And this is going to be one of the ways in which you will be doing so, if not this year, then in the upcoming years. So the overall market value of cryptocurrencies climbed to about 1.5 trillion, right? And to sum at 2.3 trillion as of December 17th, according to CoinGecko, which is an amazing platform that's tracking cryptocurrencies. The important thing to recognize about this, guys, is when we think about cryptocurrency, it is not only just an asset class. So if any of you guys here invest in the stock market, you might be looking at crypto as an opportunity to just invest into one of the coins, but it is also now being transacted. These days, brands are starting to sell products on Shopify, and they're accepting cryptocurrency as a method of payment. Right? This is very important. This is a huge signifier to consumers out there that are basically telling everyone, hey, we're willing to engage in this way in which you are currently seeing wealth. In the last 3 years, guys, we have seen more crypto millionaires under the age of 18. So again, even if you're saying to yourself, I may not be interested in crypto, or this may not be my space, as a business owner who's here today, you probably want to be chasing where wealth creation is happening, because we all want to go after the money. So if I'm telling you that all of this money is being generated, all of this value is being generated within this certain market, right? Alarms should be going off in your minds, and you should be asking yourself, how do I get a piece of that pie in order to not just stay relevant, but in order to increase my revenue streams? Now, OpenSea, which is one of the largest secondary markets and trading platforms for NFTs, witnessed $5 billion worth of transactions this past January. That's a lot. Again, even if you're like, I don't know if this is for me, I don't know about NFTs or crypto, these numbers should be staggering and should be alarming if you have yet to really consider this as part of your business model or revenue streams. We're also seeing amazing collaborations. We're seeing companies like Adidas start to partner up with Bored Ape Yacht Club. What's amazing with that is we're seeing contemporary brands today working with NFTs and working with all of these different companies that are partnering up and saying, hey, my first foray into engaging in the space may not be to create my own NFT, but it actually might be to partner up with an NFT company or brand and start to Web3 myself in a way that is a little bit less labor intensive. Now, the other thing that I think is so fascinating about this is that companies are also starting to raise capital, non-dilutive capital, through the sale of NFTs. Now, has anyone here ever received funding for their business, either through a bank loan or through friends and family raises, or anyone have received money? Yes, okay. A lot of you guys are self-funded. That's pretty impressive. Or maybe you're just too shy, and that's okay. But when it comes to looking at fundraising, and it comes to looking at how I'm able to increase revenue, right, capital for my business, many of us, the first thing we do is we go to a bank, right? And we have to look and see, do I qualify for this small business loan, right? What's my credit like? What am I leveraging, right? And sometimes it can get a little bit sticky, right? It's like we can get a little concerned about that. My credit score, all these things are on the line. If we're going out and raising any sort of institutional capital, there's certainly a fear, right, of having to give away a piece of our company, especially in the very early stages. You may not even know what your business is worth. So how do you go ahead and allocate a percentage of your business and sell off a certain piece of it when you don't even know what you have on your hands? So why are NFTs so exciting or interesting? Because the launch of an NFT project, right? And I'll give you kind of the model of how to think about this in a light way. I know I don't have you guys all day. But the very nature of how we launch these projects and how we communicate with our community, with the people who are the most closest fans to us, is that they're actually willing to pay to be a part of this exclusive journey. Now, you might have actually said to yourself, well, what about equity crowdfunding? What about things like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, right? That actually used to be quite impressive back in the day. It was like, how do we get community to support us? How do we leverage our followers? That used to be the way to do it. And what happened with that? Well, when it came to things like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, you ended up spending so much money to get your campaigns off the ground. You actually ended up spending a lot of the money you received to produce those physical assets to then give back to your community members. So it ended up becoming, for many small companies, simply a PR play. They didn't make a lot of money off of it, right? And that's important to recognize. When you ask yourself about things like equity crowdfunding, the beauty of that is everyone's giving you a little bit of money and you get to fundraise from a lot of people. But guess what? They own a piece of your business, right? Which can also seem a little nerve-wracking. So when it comes to the NFT launches, right? When you do launch your first NFT, which I hope many of you guys are going, holy bananas, how do I do that? I need to call Shama. You want to be asking yourself, what is the roadmap, right? Which is really shorthand for what the hell is the business plan, right? How is this person going to use the capital that I am fundraising from, right? If I'm going to give you $500 or $1,000 and you're going to get that from 10,000 people, what are you going to do with those assets, right? What is the invitation to be a part of this community? And so from the fundraising capabilities of non-dilutive fundraising, I think NFTs are an amazing way to tap into community, an amazing way to be able to tap into fundraising, and to be able to take people along the journey with you early on. Now, because this is so new for brands, we have yet to actually see who are the brands that are making good on their promises, right? I imagine if many of you guys come back here in the summer and I'm back here again, I'll be like, hey guys, these are launches that have done really bad, right? These are ones where actually they're not making good on their promise. And certainly today, there are some companies that have actually done a horrible job of launching their NFT platforms, mostly because they're missing this key ingredient, which is not just community, but the invitation to community to join you, right? That is very, very important. And so when we're looking at who that right target market is, right? Who are those crypto millionaires that I want to be going after? Is my brand the right fit for them? Very similar to the idea around looking at things like social media. If your customer is on Facebook and they're not on TikTok, well, why would you launch a TikTok strategy around a Facebook customer? We need to be thinking very similarly when it comes to things like the invitation for NFTs. Many of your customers here today may not be the right fit, right? And so it's very important to ask yourself, am I launching something for the sake of being a part of the conversation? Or am I launching something because this really is a natural fit for an invitation? So who are those people, right? Well, right now when we're looking at kind of the different segmentations of NFT platforms and who's the most successful, we're looking for consumers right now who are interested in making money. So obviously based on the strength of your project, there are a lot of people who are buying and selling NFTs in order to make a profit. I did a short post the other day, and it was around, I bought an NFT for $200, ended up selling it for close to $3,000 in the period of 30 days. So people are investing and trading in that way, and those might not be your long-term community members, but it's important to recognize that they're out there. Now, the next channel would be those who are looking for clout, the ones who want to be first, the ones who are actually the evangelists for your brands and who want to be able to say, I'm a part of this. Now, launching an NFT platform might actually get other people who were never your customers to begin with to say, that is such a cool roadmap and such a cool vision that I want to sign up to be a part of that strategy. I want to be a part of that company because I believe in that founder. So that's important to understand as well. You might be getting a whole new segment of people who are interested in the clout of being first. And then we're also looking at collectibles, right? So the more scarce, those of you guys who are designers, those of you guys who have sketchbooks, those of you guys who have an archive of amazing, juicy assets that are waiting to be out there, right? This is a really great opportunity for collectibles and for people to own a piece of your brand. So let's talk a little bit about what the invitation is. Now, one company here that I think is doing such a great job in terms of the invitation is Mavion. They haven't launched yet, so their invitation is quite juicy. And if you guys take a look at it, it's mavion.world. Now, what I love about what they're doing is they are one of the first that I have actually had the privilege of seeing that are bridging together physical and digital. And I'll break it down for you. So the traditional historical business model of the founders of this company, they have a business right now, and it's in the transformation and a rebrand called the Accessory Junkie, where they were sourcing from products all over the world. And they were saying, hey, if you buy this product, you're actually giving back to these artisans. These artisans are going to have X percentage of the sale. Now, what they're doing is they're taking a second life to what's happening in this space. They're continuing to work with artisans across the world, and what they're saying is we're going to create an NFT that's going to go alongside that physical product. And that NFT is going to unlock experiences, and it's going to unlock visibility and access that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So they're actually launching the physical in tandem with the digital. Now, because of the way that NFT strategies work and the way that you can list them, there's a concept here, and you might be familiar with it, which is the royalty component. This is actually a major fundamental game changer when it comes to things like music, when it comes to art, and when it comes to the creators actually being able to take advantage of their impact in society and in commerce. Far too long have we seen creators produce incredible content that then gets, R&D'd, so ripped off and duplicated, and they don't get any sort of resources back from that, right? For the first time now more than ever, with the transaction and the sale of NFTs, you can build in the royalty components, right, to your business model. So what is Mavion doing? Well, they're saying, hey, every time you resell this NFT, now you can choose to resell it with the product attached, or you can choose to resell that product on its own, right, that NFT on its own. A certain percentage is going to go back to the creator and to the artisan in that country every single time. So when we're looking at the impact of how these activations can actually have residual benefits to core artisan communities, right? We're all looking for that way to give back. We're all looking for that opportunity to increase our brand values. That, I think, is pretty incredible. Now, in addition to that, they're also launching the augmented reality piece of that accessory. So now myself, right, I can now say, okay, I'm going to have this NFT, which I can now have increased access and value, right? I can now have this amazing product that I'm going to wear. And then as I start to develop my metaverse avatar, I can now have the augmented reality version of this that I can then use across various different platforms. That to me is a 360-degree approach to how we're looking at our identities and how we're looking at spending our resources. Again, we're very early in Web3 and NFTs, but the brands today that have that land grab opportunity are going to be the ones who capture that market share and actually refine their strategies over time. Now, what are the other images I have up here? Well, I don't know if you guys heard about Gary Vee and his fly fishing restaurant. Anyone hear about this? Okay, this is super dope. okay? Why is this super dope? Because, and I'm like, oh my God, I like don't eat fish and I'm a vegetarian, but I like want to be a part of this because it's so cool. Okay, so what has he done, right? So Gary Vee has launched the first NFT restaurant. And so why is that important? Because it's not just NFTs that we're transacting on, these JPEGs, right? We're actually looking at the utility. Like I said earlier, what is the invitation? What are you asking people to come on a journey with you for? So with Gary's fly fishing restaurant, here's what happened. He sold off NFTs that ended up becoming allocations, right, of someone who can now have access to this membership club to book a seat at the restaurant. Now, it's not that you have unlimited access to have to be able to go there anytime. You still have to book a reservation. You still have to pay for your food. But as a way of creating access and creating a relationship with diehard fans who are going to say, hey, I want to have first access to this community, first access to this club. And guess what? If I don't own the NFT and I actually want to host an event there, I have to rent, right, the NFTs from holders in order to be able to then have access to this event venue, to then be able to spend money, again, to then host the event. So why is this interesting? Because today you might be saying, well, Shama, I don't know if I want to create a bunch of JPEGs, and I don't really know what the utility or value of that is, but hey, I actually have like a VIP or loyalty club, and man, that loyalty club and those VIP customers, they come back over and over again. How can I actually create a better connection with them? Well, an NFT is that invitation to provide them a digital opportunity to create that connection, right? Again, going back to the invitation, not just the digital asset. Now, the other two images I have here, one is the Balmain and Barbie launch, which I thought was just kind of like hilarious. I always feel like every few years we hear of Barbie trying to make a comeback and trying to be relevant, and obviously working with high fashion brands, and many of the high fashion brands today are doing a land grab and being first to market when it comes to Web3. This particular launch I thought was kind of like it wasn't exactly something that had a lot of utility, right? It was something where if you wanted to have that collectible and you wanted to be a part of that art community, right, you would purchase that. And so from a PR hype standpoint, I think that this launch was successful for them. But from the perspective of utility and access and how am I incorporating this into a longer term invitation, I'd say it probably went up in terms of hype, and then it's probably gonna go here and then kind of level out. Sadly, we're seeing that with a lot of the luxury brands. Rimowa last year ended up doing a launch with NFTs where they took that launch and they said, hey, we're gonna create physical products alongside of these NFTs. Now, where they missed the mark was that the consumers that they were pitching to were not actually that interested, right? They didn't sell out of it. And why is that? Because again, going back to the components of who this customer is, that high-end $2,000 suitcase with this light fixture and this graphic thing just did not make much sense. Now, kudos to them for being one of the first to market, and guess what? They got a lot of press, they got some hype, people were interested, but impact, was it worth the money? I don't know, right? And so I'm in it today as long-term strategy, long-term revenue planning. How are you launching these strategies alongside your regular kind of cadence of communication with consumers? Now, one of the most exciting activations I've seen from a Web3 business is Gucci. Not just because they're doing great and because I used to work for them, but one of the things that I love about how bullish they've been is not just in creating NFTs and creating these visual assets, but in taking a stake and saying, I'm going to develop experiences in Sandbox, right, which is an online gaming platform. I'm going to create experiences in Roblox, which is another digital platform. So when you're asking yourself, who are the companies that I should be looking at, right? You might be sitting here today saying, oh my gosh, there's like 1,000 things for me to do. Where do I start? Start by becoming a student, right? Start by looking at some of the activations where companies are taking a 360-degree approach. Look at what's working, right? And look at what's not working. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this. Okay, so here's a little bit of kind of behind the scenes of Web3 execution. When I'm kind of looking at my digital landscape and how I'm looking at my approach, this is an important thing to ask yourself, right? These are very different images on here than, let's say, a talk I would have given a few years ago where I would have said, here's how you engage with your consumer today. So, what's going on here? Well, I launched my own Twitter handle specifically just to engage in Web3. A lot of your consumers are doing the same, right? They're developing other persona. I now am a part of something called Discord. Is anyone on Discord? Does anyone know what the hell that is? Okay. I'm on like 37 Discord servers, right? For any of you guys who don't know Discord, it is like Slack combined with meth. It is on steroids. It's like, I go onto Discord and I'm like, oh my God, this is happening, that's happening. Like, how do I stay up on this? Like, I mean, my gosh, it is insane. But guess what? My brain is being rewired to think in a far more active way. And because of how challenging it is to stay on top of all these things, it's actually becoming even more important that I look at my time and energy and where I'm spending my efforts more specifically, right? So now I have a Discord name. And you might also notice that my profile pictures are not pictures of me, right? Now all of a sudden I'm taking on a digital identity. Many of you guys are probably wondering, well, what's the significance of that? Well, both of those identities that you see up there are both NFTs. And that is a very unique way in which a lot of consumers are looking to engage. They're looking to see themselves in this new metaverse landscape. And so as you're approaching your strategy to building something like this, you want to ask yourself, how do I make this reflective of my consumer base? How do I make it so that they actually want to talk about this, so that they're interested in engaging because I see myself in that brand? Now, other things I have on here, over in the corner, you'll see something that says scalingretail.eth. This is very important, right? We recently launched as a new revenue and payment gateway for our clients, the opportunity, bless you, the opportunity to pay us in Ethereum, right? As we're looking at regulation, taxation within cryptocurrencies, which are obviously coming down, and it's very important because we all want this to be a platform that ends up being very lucrative and valuable in terms of how we tap into global marketplaces, having a .eth address is going to be important. So all of you guys right now should be writing down, go ahead and Google Ethereum Naming Service, or ENS, and get your name. I don't know who your names are today, but if I had them all, I'd buy them and I'd resell them to you for 10 times the cost. And why is that? Because your digital wallet is going to be very important, not just for you personally, but your digital wallet for your business is going to be important as you want to, again, capture a percentage of this insanely large currency and market. Now, other things that are important here, the other bottom, you'll see here a digital gallery, right? And what I think is important, sorry, I'm like looking at this is my cheat screen. That screen. You'll see here a digital gallery, and this is important. You might be saying to yourself, well, how do NFTs manifest themselves in kind of the day-to-day? How do I see it? Well, there are now places for you to see digital galleries. Your avatar gets represented within a new metaverse landscape, right? Your art is on display. And unlike keeping art inside of your apartment or your home, whereby only a few of us can see it, in this world of blockchain, in transparency, in authenticity, everyone can see everything. Now in the middle here, you see this friendship bracelet. This is the launch of a really cool new platform called My BFF, which is catered towards women in crypto. It's founded by Britt Morin, who has her famous Brit & Co platform, and also Jamie Schmidt from Schmidt Naturals. CPG people, right? Women who are launching consumer products, and they're saying, hey, we need to be involved in this conversation with our CPG products and with our communities because this is where things are heading. Now, what's very interesting about this friendship bracelet is I didn't have to buy it. How did I get it? I attended an event. This particular item was sent to my crypto wallet because I attended an event. I spent 1 hour of my time at an event, and I received this NFT that is now worth about 1 Ethereum, which is about $2,500. The brand, that group is not paying me for that. But guess what? The scarcity and the value of being one of a few people who has that has driven up the price of that. And guess what? It drives up the brand value. So again, as a brand owner, you might be asking yourself, what are the unique opportunities where I can actually give something to my consumer or my loyalty base for free, but because of the scarcity, it now gets driven up in value. Guess what? That makes me more wanting to be a VIP, highly engaged consumer of your brand, because that means that I'm actually going to have residual benefits of being engaged with your business that goes beyond selling a product. So we open up the conversation saying, well, what if you didn't have a product to sell? What would you be selling? You're selling time, loyalty, experience. You're selling exclusivity. You're selling an opportunity for someone to say, I believe in this so much that I'm going to spend my time and energy here. And guess what? That's going to have residual value. All right, interesting activations. A couple really cool projects that, for those of you guys, and we're going to move on to physical space. And oh my gosh, I feel like I always can spend way too long talking about this, so I'm gonna be quick with the wind here. So some of the cool things that are happening here in terms of activations. An amazing company right now called Unblocked recently launched. Now those of you guys who are very interested in the creator space and what's happening with them, they're the people who actually are turning all of the Billboard Music Awards into NFTs, right? This is mainstream, guys, right? We might be going, I don't know. It's mainstream. People are doing it. It's happening. They're also the ones who came out just this past weekend, right, with the Super Bowl, with the Rolling Stone NFT project, right? And why was that NFT project so impactful? It was impactful because Rolling Stone actually chose 12 different NFT brands to partner with. So again, as a retailer or as a brand, you might be looking at who's doing what. How can I participate in something that's already happening without having to build an entire infrastructure on my own? And then the other thing that I've showcased here is with all these very cryptic zeros and ones and all of that, is an incredible platform that's going to be launched in a few months. It's all around building these platforms on Bitcoin, right? So a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about, I'm not going to go into detail on this. There are a lot of different ways in which you can be building out your NFT programs. Most of the people here are thinking about Ethereum. I'm happy to talk afterwards today about my opinions on what I think is happening. But the most important thing for you guys to recognize is if you've heard things like, oh my gosh, the transaction fees on this is so high, right? Are people going to be willing to pay these transaction fees? Well, let me be one of the first to tell you that there are a number of other platforms and ways of launching NFTs that will not be so price prohibitive. And because we're so early on in the space, you are going to see these transaction fees heavily decline over time as we find new solutions. So don't be too worried about that, right? Think more in terms of the invitation. So this is so cool. So this is one of the Louis Vuitton launches, and this is actually not a digital launch. This is a physical launch, right? When we start thinking about physical spaces, right? When we start bridging together this conversation of how am I creating a experience and an invitation for my consumer, right? Remember, we started off the conversation with supply chain is derailed. We are concerned about not having product on time, certainly at a price point where our consumers are going to be happy about it, because my gosh, this stuff is expensive these days to ship. We don't even know if we've bought the right things because of the way consumer behavior is shifting. Maybe you overbought and it still hasn't arrived yet. What are the answers to filling in the gaps of what's happening with product? So we went over the digital answers here, particularly NFTs, though there are others. And then I kind of want to close in on physical space. We are not just moving into the metaverse and we will no longer be shopping in person. We are shopping in person like never before. And unfortunately, many of us are used to very kind of high touch experiences in store. So those of you guys who have a retail space, my gosh, you have a tall order to fill because customer service and those needs are quite high right now. So domestic and local shopping is so much more important to people. And when we're thinking about these price gaps, and when we're thinking about consumers who are now purchasing more domestically, you know, it used to be that I would travel to Paris and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna buy that handbag. It's gonna be way cheaper because I'm buying it in Paris. But now, because people are not traveling as much, luxury brands and brands at mass have had to narrow the price gaps, particularly because they need to be able to sell stuff to us at home, right? How are you going to be able to incentivize people to still purchase if they're not going to be getting that tax-free perk when they used to go shopping internationally? So looking at how we're kind of changing our pricing strategies and that shopping in-store experience, I think is super important. We're also seeing the normalization of COVID safety protocols, which I think is amazing. You know, sadly, I feel like every other month it's like, is it a mask mandate? Is it not? I'm in San Francisco, you know, it's always kind of crazy, we don't ever know. But now we're starting to see a lot of normalization of these protocols, and I think that's very helpful. People are going to be back in store, they already are in store, and in fact, people are so excited to be shopping physical home goods in store. In fact, that's one of the leading categories when it comes to how we're looking at people consuming physical product, right? A lot of home goods. Beauty these days is really being captured by a lot of the, you know, AR, VR stuff, which is cool. Today's consumers are more likely to buy a lipstick after seeing themselves with a filter of that lipstick than they are to buy a couch, right? And those of you guys who tried to buy couches, which I did in the last 12 months, found yourself at a loss because those couches were not available. In fact, those couches were back ordered for like 9 months. And luckily I have one, I'm not on the floor anymore, but that was a really tough thing. So we went in store in order to buy our products for home goods. And obviously physical space becomes this amazing opportunity to bridge community. Instead of Instagrammable walls, we're actually seeing retail spaces with content studios, right? How do you get people to come into your physical space and actually say, hey, I'm not just gonna take a selfie, but I actually have the tools and resources to be able to create innovative and impressive content that I want to share. So maybe it's a video service, right? Maybe you have opportunity for people to try on new products. You are creating now more experiences beyond the selfie. The selfie is a very 0 to 1 sort of engagement. We are looking at community. And some interesting stores here that have recently opened up. One here is a picture of a non-alcoholic beverage store, which, guys, I think is so incredible, right? I mean, I opened up with like, gosh, new innovation in these times of change. You know, I just came off of my first dry January, and my gosh, I was like so excited because there were so many options of other things I could drink. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have this like fake whiskey, I'm gonna have this like non-alcoholic Riesling. I mean, I never had so many more options than ever before, right? That is innovation. Those products were not available 4 years ago, right? This is very, very exciting. And then the other side here, I have another store that I think is fantastic called the Gorky, which is in LA, which is a new retail store, right? Again, opportunities for small business owners who are saying, hey, how do I create that physical manifestation of that product, of that experience in a small, easily negotiable lease? Because now property managers know this is not the time, right, to be holding people into these 20-year leases. Though let me tell you, those people who I know who've locked themselves into long-term leases in the last year have gotten incredible deals. Incredible deals. So the flexibility is there, depending on what you're looking for. All right, guys, I barely made it to the hour, which is really cool. I want to give just special thanks to some of these amazing reports and people on stage here. So the McKinsey Business of Fashion report was really fantastic. The Big Eye Agency report did a fantastic study, really interviewing a lot of the in-person experiences. Ryan Peterson, the CEO of Flexport, who, my gosh, you guys, if you don't know him, you're not following him, he is really first to market in terms of what's happening with global supply chain, how companies are being able to take advantage of opportunities in that, and really guiding them towards a lot of amazing resources. And then the other 3 companies that I mentioned, keep your eyes out for these guys. Remember, be a student, right, of this industry as you guys are determining your strategies. So Mavion, World, Unblocked, and Revolutionize. And please, contact me. I'm happy to take questions right now, but thank you guys so much for this very insane conversation around supply chains, NFTs, and physical space. Thank you. Does anyone